If you're like me and you didn't watch the show until it popped up on the top 10 trending page on Netflix, you probably jumped right into season 2 after the cliffhanging ending to season 1. Well, today we're going to dive into Manifest's second season and try to answer all the questions we were left with. Did Jared shoot or even kill Zeke, or maybe it was the other way around, or honestly maybe even Mick got shot? And what's the meaning behind the callings and the damn peacock? What is the dark lightning? What is the major plotting? Where did the pilot and the Swedish scientist go? How big will the Church of the Return become? And goddammit, when will Cal stop being so creepy? All these questions and more I will attempt to answer as we take an in-depth recap of Season 2. So of course, if you haven't watched my video on the first season, it is linked in the description of this video, and you should probably watch that one first. And again, if you haven't seen Manifest in general, I don't know why you're watching this video, but major spoiler warnings for the entire series. So real quick, I just want to do a reminder of where we left off with Season 1, so the family and the rest of the passengers found out that however long you were disappeared for, that's how long they have left to live, and the way you supposedly died the first time is how you die when your time is up. And we saw this with Griffin towards the end of Season 1. The team saved all the missing passengers from the brutal test being carried out by the Major in an explosion that killed NSA agent Robert Vance. The Major isn't done, however, and Cal is her main target because of his special abilities. The Major lured in Saanvi by posing as a therapist and attempts to uncover more information about Saanvi's test. We ended the last episode with a brawl between jealous Jared and Mick's new man Zeke that ended in a gun being taken out, and as the shot is fired, it cuts to black and we don't know who it hit. Oh yeah, and the captain of Flight 828 went crazy and kidnapped a Swedish scientist, and they flew into a lightning storm and disappeared into thin air just like they did the first time. So now, let's start Season 2 of Manifest. As we start episode 1, we are taken back to the night Flight 828 disappeared, and goddamn, I have seen this scene way too many times. Mom's not wrong, Jared's not gonna wait around forever, great marriage pep talk. But it turns out we are actually in Mick's flashback calling, and she is aware she is in it, but no one else is besides Cal. As she's trying to figure out what's happening, we cut to Mick slowly waking up because she was the one who got shot. I bet you didn't see that one coming. But Jared calls the cops and he is saying that Zeke is a suspect, and Mick, being the real one she is, tells Zeke to just run instead of helping her. She keeps fading in and out of the calling, and we are taken to the hospital where the family meets Jared in the waiting room. You already know that they couldn't kill off the main character, but when I saw Saanvi walk in that room, I knew damn well she was gonna fix her. As she comes to, Ben and Jared go to see her, but she said Jared can't come, and honestly at this point I started to feel bad for him. And no idea why her literal father didn't come to see her too, but alright. She tells Ben about the calling and he's like, oh, you got shot and almost died? First thing I'm going to tell you when you wake up is that we're all going to die in 2024, just by the way. Cal pops his head in typical creepy Cal fashion, and he said he was having the same calling, and before Mick regained consciousness, he was going to tell her, quote unquote, save the passengers. Let's fucking go, guys. Season 2 has officially started. We jump to 2 months later, and Ben has been tracking down all the passengers he hasn't met with yet to try and figure out the death date. He walks up to an abandoned looking house and we see a red X and Get Out spray painted on the house as one of the 828ers pops out with a shotgun, showing that the Xers of the Flight 828 hate groups have grown as a stronger threat. Grace's baby is doing good, but it turns out she had a miscarriage with Danny's baby a year prior to Ben returning, and this just stirs up more drama on if they should do a DNA test or not to see who's the father. Yeah, they still haven't figured that one out yet. We pan over to Saanvi as she's spilling her daily life to the Major, and from the first fake therapy session you can just tell the Major is foaming at the mouth to ask about Saanvi's research. But for now, it's just relationships and work. Zeke sends Mick a postcard that says he kept running, so she goes to try and fix it, but there's a new captain in town at the precinct, and she makes it very clear from the start that she does not mess around. Mick gets a calling about a couple on Flight 828, and luckily enough, Ben has gone even harder with his fallen obsession about solving all of this, so they team up and are ready for their first mission of the season in typical NCIS fashion. After Grace and Olive have an awkward interaction with Danny, we cut back to Mick and Ben as they go to the couple's house, and it turns out they have been missing for almost a week. The housekeeper reveals that they had actually made a beautiful mind map too, but this one was all of religious texts and pictures from their callings. The housekeeper says that they weren't even religious before the calling started happening to them. And to top it all off, the Xers had been harassing them for weeks and they were being watched by white vans parked outside their house. Cal makes his way over to Zeke's mom's house because he had a calling of him hiding out there. He tells Zeke that him and Mick need to be together because neither of them have that much time left. Zeke goes to meet her one last time before he turns himself in because he wants to own up to his past. But as he's about to be taken into a cop car, him and Mick have a calling of the missing couple's car near a bridge. Ben and Mick go to investigate and they find them parked by the water, and it turns out they have been seeing the same vision of their car going over this cliff by the bridge and hearing kids screaming as they are burned alive. This plus the Bible scriptures made them interpret this as, well, that it was going to happen to them. And of course this would happen because, well, they don't know anything about the callings and that they are used to stop bad things from happening, not cause them. And as Mick peers over the cliff, we see that a car had crashed there earlier that night with the family inside. The callings do it again. And now the couple calmed down and they said that they don't even hear the voices in their head anymore. But again, the new police captain doesn't play any games and wants more answers on how they just stumbled upon this. As episode 1 ends, the Major manipulates Saanvi into talking about what happened on flight 828. Cal and Mick had the same calling of the plane, except this time after Cal says save the passengers, Mick looks up and now Zeke is on the plane. And lastly, if you've seen season 2, you might already know what I'm about to say, but we pan over to Ben as he sees a white van parked in front of his house this time, and as he goes to investigate, they kidnap him. He's brought to another location, and as they take the bag off his head, it's none other than Vancey Boy himself. Vance felt like if his own government was willing to kill him to stop him from uncovering the truth, he was better off if they thought he was dead so he could work in secret. Ben brings Mick to come see him, and this means that the team is getting back together, and I couldn't be happier because 1, I obviously really liked Vance, but if we're being real, we need him for all of this to work. Ben gets a call from a fellow passenger, and here's where we meet TJ. Now there's a lot of controversy online about his age, which we'll see why later, but I think he's about 19, and he's going to come into play throughout the entire season, and you could just tell from day 1. Ben and Grace finally cave in, and they go to get a DNA test to see if Ben or Danny is the father of the expected baby. But right before they take her blood, Grace has a calling of her own voice yelling stop, which proves that Ben is the father. Because we know that in order to have these callings, you have to most likely have the protein marker in your blood. Now how you get this could be from a near-death experience or divine intervention. We aren't 100% sure of that at this point in the series, but it's assumed that this blood marker was passed on to the baby from Ben, and Grace is receiving the callings from the baby through her own head. So no need for a DNA test now. But this raises the question, will the baby have a death date also? Mick goes back to work and now she's got a new partner, Detective Drea McCamey, but I'm gonna just call her McCamey for now. And I didn't really trust her at first because it seemed like she had some other intentions, but by the end of the season, I actually ended up really liking her as a character. TJ gets a calling that leads to him and Ben finding a dead body at a college campus. While this is happening, Olive meets a member of the Church of the Believers who is just your typical typecast edgy female teenager, you know, colored hair, nose ring, tattoos. Honestly, that's kind of my type. But this draws her into wanting to rebel more because now that it's confirmed that the new baby and Grace have the callings, she feels pretty left out. Zeke finally has his trial for shooting Mick and he's committed to paying for his actions, so he pleads guilty with no lawyer. While he gets settled in prison, him, Mick, and Cal have another calling like the one from earlier where they were back on the plane. Except this time it causes them to shake violently as if they were really there experiencing it again. Showing that these three are connected for a reason to stop something, just like with the wolf calling from season 1. So it turns out that the girl TJ found at the college campus was an abstract artist that would make collages from the unclaimed items of dead people. Since TJ happened to go to that same college before he went missing on flight 828, his unclaimed dorm things ended up in her hands. So when the police were searching through the dorm and found his fingerprints, they assumed that he was the killer. But after finding out why those items were there and a calling that led to Mick and McCamey finding the real killer, a campus security guard, TJ was set free. He can now join the team. The new captain is even more suspicious of Mick after she solves another case claiming it was from an anonymous tip. She now wants a more in-depth paper trail to all her cases and says that she is going to be watching her closely from now on. I told y'all, she does not play any games. The second episode ends with TJ and Ben going to retrieve TJ's unclaimed items which have photos of him and his dead mother. The whole story was heartbreaking and I just want to leave it on the high note that they left it on. But then we pan over to Olive, who met up with a typecast edgy teenager again, and they went to a sermon of the Church of the Believers. And man, they made Olive so annoying for the majority of season 2. Then Ben meets with Vance again and they find out that the Major ordered some of the same equipment Saanvi has been using, and you instantly think that it's her coworker who's been simping all over her this whole time, but in reality Saanvi is just spilling all of this information to her therapist, who really is the Major, thinking that she wouldn't understand what it means. We wrap up with another Cal, Mick, and Zeke calling, and it got so bad for Zeke that he was tied up in the medical ward of the prison. Episode 3 starts off with a focus on Saanvi, and we flash back to right before flight 828, and her partner Alex didn't show up for the trip and eventually moved on after the disappearance. And I gotta hand it to the Major, she does a great acting job as a therapist as Saanvi pours all of this out to her. Olive keeps getting more rebellious and goes to more Church of the Believers sermons, and Adrian has just gone overboard with his God complex. I mean, look at the church now. I guess it's not too far from real life though. Vance and Ben continue to search for the leak, not knowing it's actually Saanvi, and they want to set up a trap to get the Major. Since she is extra interested in Cal because he has special abilities, they want to pin one of the flight 828 passengers as being even more special than Cal. So when Saanvi goes to test on this extra special passenger, the Major will jump at the opportunity and get caught Scooby-Doo style. We will see how that works out. Grace is trying to adjust to life now having the callings as well, and it tells her to open her eyes after she talks with her friend from Pilates. And as she drives away, she sees a gargoyle on top of her car. She does some research with Cal, and gargoyles are symbols for protection from danger. Her next mission has now started. Cal, Mick, and Zeke have another calling where they are back on the plane, except this time it breaks in half and Zeke is sucked up into oblivion. Danger is clearly on its way. Ben gets a job from his fine-ass ex who works at the college to teach a lecture on math or something. I don't know, man. I love Grace, but just look at Ben's ex. As he walks in the lecture hall, he is met with an overfilled class with no math majors, just some annoying 20-year-olds asking a bunch of flight 828 questions. We cut back to Grace and Cal, and they find her friend from the gym and try to talk to her, and she just thinks they are crazy. Mick goes to find Zeke and says fuck it and walks right into the prison and finds him tweaking off whatever drugs they gave him, and he now realizes he needs to get the hell out of there. Ben is too nice of a guy and has to tell Saanvi about his and Vance's plan, and also the fact that Vance is alive, and she gets all upset and tells Ben to leave, so it looks like the plan is on hold for now because Ben just cannot lie to save his life, and then he caves and tells the Vance that he spilled the beans on his fake death. She must have had a change of heart because as she goes into her next therapy session with the Major, she starts piecing it all together. The only person who could have leaked Saanvi's research is her. So she follows through with the plan and very awkwardly goes, yeah, it's all in my fridge at work. And then the Major even more awkwardly says, oh, the next person canceled actually, tell me about it. I don't know exactly what I'm getting at, but it was just one of those scenes that could have used some better writing. Zeke has another court hearing about shooting Mick and she goes up to testify his innocence and, in the process, accuses Jared of some dirty police work that got Zeke arrested in the first place. Man, Jared is down astronomically right now. And now Zeke is free and goddammit, he is a perfect match for Mick, and him and Cal are becoming best friends. It's all just perfect. The episode ends with Jared chatting it up with a bartender at a bar known for having a bunch of Xers as regulars as he unknowingly buys one of the members a drink. Also, Olive is now speaking at the Church of the Believers, and then Ben talks with his new coworkers at the college again, and it turns out one of them, who's like on the school board or something, is the husband of the lady that Grace was trying to open her eyes to with the callings. Wait a minute, hold on. I know this is all a lot at once, but Ben's coworker who hired him is part of the hate group The Xers, and his wife was the lady that Grace had a calling about who thought she was crazy. And we're gonna find out a lot more about them soon. Lastly, Saanvi meets up with Ben and Vance as her plan is coming into fruition. She told him what she figured out and she set up cameras in her lab knowing that the Major thought important research was in the fridge. The guy who recommended Saanvi to her as a therapist in the first place stole her fake research, and now the crew is one step ahead. So at this point, no one knows that the fake therapist is the Major, and we have this awesome closing scene where Saanvi tells Vance her name and he looks it up in a government database, and this therapist lady was the Major General of the Army, hence the nickname, the Major. Episode 4 starts back at the airport on the night of the Flight 828 incident where we see TJ actually talked with Olive before he went and took one of the ticket vouchers, and Olive was crushing on him so hard, she literally tried to go on 828 with him. But I mean shit, now they're like the same age. But we cut back to Olive in current time where she has further descended into this Church of the Believers nonsense, and Adrian continues to become mad with power. The theory of reincarnation and miracles becomes a stronger belief among the church. But Saanvi though, aka Miss Get Shit Done around here, has now successfully eliminated the blood marker anomaly inside of a petri dish, showing it's possible to remove it from one of the passengers. And remember, at this point in the show it's almost confirmed that the anomaly is causing the callings and also the death date. Again, Josh Dallas, the actor that plays Ben Stone, is easily the most talented on the cast, but we get this very emotional scene of him recording messages for Olive for after he dies. This series can really pull at the heartstrings sometimes. But this short scene is more important than you would think because it's the first time we see Ben almost accept defeat in a way, or at least accept the fact that he's gonna die, which in general is very out of character for him. But we cut back to Olive's dumbass and she's spilling all the tea to Adrian about the death date and the callings, and right when he hears this you can just tell his energy shifts. This man Adrian is bad news, bro. TJ meets with Ben as they start to create a nice father-son connection, but he tells him about another calling involving a bug, a bird, a fish, and a tiger. And this continues probably my favorite part of the show with the mythological treasure hunt the main characters go on. And now with the resource of Ben's office at the university, they can really start to research this shit. Mick gets a calling telling her to bring him back, and this leads her to a bank where guess who's chilling at the front? The boy Zeke, and of course it turns out he got the same calling. A Flight 828 passenger springs from the bank and holds up a robbery, but oddly enough he says he just wants to get to the lockbox, he doesn't want any money. We cut back to TJ and Ben as Olive joins the mix and reveals that the bug and the tiger calling TJ had actually is a symbol for this Gramercy Club, which apparently is like a rich kid athletic club that formed over the past couple years nearby. But they are led to these plaques for some 2012 team through this athletic club, and the winners are these two brothers, one of them being Logan, the man robbing the bank right now. We cut back to the robbery as the cops of the building surrounded, and Logan reveals the lockbox he needed is his brother's, and whatever's inside can save his life apparently. Yeah, he's also not taking the callings too well, I mean, clearly, and the image of the death date has just drove him to this point. But after Flight 828 returned, Logan's brother didn't believe he even existed anymore and completely cut him off, taking all of his stuff and everything the deceased father was going to give to Logan. So Ben and TJ go to meet his brother at the Gramercy Club to try and convince him to help, but obviously he thinks Ben and TJ are fake too. But when Ben reveals to him that Logan and all the other passengers are going to die on June 2nd, 2024, Logan's brother makes the connection. 6224 is the number on the lockbox at the bank. He's now convinced too. The brother comes to save the day and give Logan the key to the lockbox, and inside was a compass that their father had in World War II that actually saved his life by stopping a bullet that's still lodged into the metal. The calling has now been completed, but because Logan isn't a main character, he's got to go to jail. But he's at peace now that him and his brother can have a real connection, and it's another heartwarming part of the show. But since he's going to jail, he has to give the compass to Mick and reveals an even more damning piece of evidence. Logan's father was a lone survivor. But even crazier is that on the back of the compass, yep, you guessed it, it's that damn peacock. This insane episode ends, wait, man, I feel like I say that with every episode. But it ends with TJ and Olive going to the 828 church because he's tweaking about the death day, and at this point, he just needs to get with Olive so they can start dating. Jared keeps falling for this bartender, Mick and Zeke finally get it on, and then Ben and Grace share this nice warm embrace outside. And you're thinking, oh, everything's beautiful, right? But no, the Major took Saanvi's bait and goes to her lab where Troy, who I guess is her assistant, gets knocked out as they steal all of Saanvi's research. Vance and Saanvi go back to the fake therapist's office hoping to catch the Major, but it's completely empty with just an apple on the ledge. And if you remember from the Major and Saanvi's last meeting where she revealed the fake research to her, Saanvi was eating an apple the entire time to help with her fidgeting. So yeah, the Major now knows that Saanvi knows, and the cover is blown, and she knows how Saanvi can replicate the DNA anomaly. Fuck. Episode 5 takes another flashback to reveal that Olive said she had dreams where Cal would talk to her and she knew he was still alive. Around 2 years after the incident, Grace and Olive went and saw a psychic medium that said, "You've clearly lost someone who completed you, it'll all be fine," or some shit, and it gave her hope for the next 3 years after. We cut back to her at the church where this hope has now been attached to this believer nonsense. But while she's up there setting up another service, the church is broken into and one of the members is beaten severely. She pulls the fire alarm and runs to tell Adrian. As Ben finds out about this from a sketchy boss at school, he gets a calling of "Save her," so he calls Grace, and as they're on the phone, a blue car crashes and runs Grace and Cal off the road. Grace feels some pain in her stomach, so she thinks that there's going to be a problem with the baby, so they go to the hospital and run some tests. Everything seems to be fine, but while they're there, they find out that it's actually going to be a girl, meaning the "Save her" calling Ben had might have been for his now future daughter. But you already know that Ben isn't satisfied and wants to know who hit his wife's car, so he does some research with police records of other passengers receiving harassment and also hit and runs, specifically with blue cars. Man, I love Ben. Now this episode was kind of filler for the most part, but there are a couple important things that I want to go over. So when Mick brings all this 828 harassment and mistreatment from the police to Jared, he brushes the Xers off as just quote-unquote mouth breathers, almost like they aren't capable of all this and not a threat. And Jared has been falling for this bartender who, again, works at a bar where a bunch of Xers meet at. And I don't know if I said this already, but her brother who hangs out at the bar is a confirmed Xer, and he's been getting all buddy-buddy with Jared. So now we're looking at Jared like his revenge for Mick ruining his career is joining the enemy. Olive reveals to Mick that she was at the church and is a believer and knows more about what happened. She helps pick out a suspect, but eventually her involvement easily gets to the family, and I think Ben spoke for all of us when he told Olive to just stop going there and believing in the things Adrian is saying. And of course, she's a rebellious teen and annoyingly resents these just pure facts. With all of the now looked at as coordinated attacks, the idea that the Xers are an actual organized hate group causes the police to look at it differently. As they organize a sting operation at the location centered in all of these attacks, they find an empty place because they must have known they were coming. Someone's leaking information, and we all know that Jared is suspect number 1. And in the next scene, yeah, he says he did it. The bartender's brother takes Jared to meet with the leader of the Xers, and it's Ben's creepy-ass boss from school, showing that he's been faking it the whole time and he just wanted Ben to work for him for clearly other reasons. Zeke is on the road to recovery from drugs, not sure if I went over that yet, but this leads him to try to make amends with his wife. Well, they were separated, but she thought he died out in the woods, so they never got back together. And they were never technically married, they were just high off their asses and said that they were married, but his wife goes to meet him at Mick's place, and this just causes more drama, and we're gonna get into it in a minute. Ben and Grace are theorizing about what this all means when she sees the peacock symbol on the compass from the last episode, because she recognizes it from the tarot card that Olive got from the medium years ago while they were gone. Man, I cannot wait till after I post season 3 and we can really talk about this damn peacock and all of these theories and shit. But the episode ends with Ben going to the church to confront Adrian, and Ben taps into this whole new badass side of him, throwing Adrian around, looking all mean, saying, "Stay away from my daughter." Man, at first Ben was looking kind of nerdy, you know, just kind of your typical white dad, but he can be a badass, bro. He really can be a badass. Episode 6 starts with a look back at Zeke before he disappeared, and him and his wife were some serious druggies that just lived completely spontaneously. Now back in current times, he takes her to his therapy group to try and get her clean too, which leads to her having to sleep on Mick's couch. Yeah, it gets awkward for a minute, but I mean Zeke did have to deal with Jared too, I guess. Speaking of Jared, he keeps sinking further into the pants of this bartender, and then we see that Olive keeps bringing TJ to the church, and now he's starting to slowly believe in Adrian's teachings. Man, the things guys will do, bro. But Adrian sees them at the church and remembers what badass Ben did to him, so he makes him leave immediately. Because all of the media has eyes on the passengers, it's leaked out that Grace is pregnant and now news companies want to cover it. This triggers Ben to have a calling where he's back on the plane, but no one can hear him, and as he gets up from his seat, Saanvi runs to him asking for help, and she fades away. And sometimes the CGI effects are good, but sometimes they look pretty bad. I mean, just look how she fades away, man. Ben calls Mick and they go to the hospital to talk with her, but her door is locked. And as they bust through, they find Saanvi lying unconscious on the floor with shit hooked up to her arms. Yeah, it turns out that she is now testing on herself because she knows that they are running out of time. She tells Ben that she was aware in the calling, but she wasn't asking for help for her, but a crying little boy on the plane. And as she passed out from the experiment, she faded away from the calling. But the thing is, there was no other young child besides Cal on the plane, so they have to find whoever seat the boy was sitting in, and luckily Ben has now memorized the literal entire seating chart of Flight 828. Ben goes to meet with the man in the seat, and he doesn't have any kids, but he did have an unprotected one-night stand in Jamaica that resulted in him missing his flight and having to go on Flight 828. As Ben questions him, he sees a photo of the same kid on the flight, and it was the man as a child. While this calling takes the center stage for the majority of the episode, TJ and Olive go on a research hunt for this Peacock Tarot card, and a random psychic tells them it's from a deck that's been out of print for decades, the Alzuris deck, and this will come into play later as we discuss more of the theories. The other storyline we follow for episode 6 is while Zeke and Mick were gone from the apartment, some men broke in and beat up Zeke's ex. It turns out she owes 20 grand to a drug dealer Zeke and her used to buy from. We cut back to Ben as he links with Saanvi to go find the woman the man had a one-night stand with. Sorry, I just can't remember his name right now while I'm writing this. But they see the same kid from the calling, and it turns out that this woman is married and the kid was a product of her cheating on that night in Jamaica, so she just wants nothing to do with this. Team Teenage Romance does some more digging on the Alzuris deck, and this is where we get our first major breakthrough into the anthology of this mystery. So Alzuris, just like Flight 828, disappeared at sea for 10 years and then mysteriously reappeared as if he had never left, and then he started hearing voices in his head. Sound familiar? But like I said before, we're gonna go over this and more in a separate video, but for now we need to catch up with the rest of season 2. This episode is long and we just gotta start cutting the fat. I don't know why I haven't been doing it before, but you guys just seem to like how I went into full detail in the first one. But Mick and Zeke set up a sting operation to catch the guy that beat up Zeke's ex for the drug money, and this resulted in a hilarious outfit choice by Mick to try and seem hip and cool. And then the guy who had the kid ends up being a perfect match for a liver transplant because the calling was actually telling them that the boy they saw was dying. Then the actor who plays Jared has a great interrogation scene with the exes because they question his motives, but it seems like he's all in. Then TJ sets up his romantic day for Olive, how cute, blah blah blah. But more importantly, Saanvi experiments on herself again after promising Ben she wouldn't, and we end the episode with a shared calling between Ben, Saanvi, and Mick. It seems like snow is falling on them, but it's actually ash, and then they are sent to the wreckage of Flight 828 filled with a bunch of dead passengers. And then Mick says, "Is this what happened to us? Did we crash?" Again suggesting they might have actually died, or maybe this is a parallel universe. But as they look around, they see some of the dead passengers weren't on Flight 828. And as we are left in confusion, the camera pans to Adrian outside of the wreckage staring at them, meaning he is having the calling too. I told y'all he was bad news. Real quick, what's up with Cal? Once he was cured of cancer, it was like they said, fuck you, you are not important anymore. We start episode 7 with a look back at TJ before he left for Jamaica, and man, the storyline with his mom killing herself, it's way too much. I'm an only child to a single mother too, so I can't lie, this storyline got to me a couple times. But we jump back to present day where Olive FaceTimes TJ and says that they should go to the club, and I don't know about you guys, but at 17, no one I knew was going to clubs, but whatever, I guess. But because of the paranoia caused by the attention and hate they're getting, Ben and Grace tell Olive that she can't go, and now she's going full rebellious teenage girl mode, and honestly, she was like my least favorite character for a couple episodes this season. But the paranoia is heightened because now with the new calling, not only are the family and the passengers in danger, but who are these other people that are being warned to save too? Back at work, Jared is playing Mr. Nice Guy and says to Mick he's happy to help with this new calling, and right after gets a call from the bartender's brother talking about some new plan, and Jared says he'll get him some information today. Jared, what the hell happened to you, man? Next scene, we cut to an unknown man injecting some drug into a bunch of champagne bottles, and if you've seen the show, which if you haven't you need to, you already know what's going to happen with these bottles. Grace, Zeke, and Cal have a calling of them being in the same nightclub Olive wants to go to, and Cal yells, "Save the passengers, it's happening now." We cut to the nightclub as TJ and Olive pull up, and Mick happens to be there to meet with an 828 believer, Isaiah, because he wants to tell her more information about the church robbery, but he's stuck at work and conveniently is a manager at this club. Ben wants to talk to Adrian, but he knows he needs to be nice, so he invites him for a drink. Adrian says to meet him tonight, and yep, you guessed it, it's at the same nightclub. So now Ben, Adrian, Isaiah, Mick, TJ, and Olive are all here. Ben meets Adrian, and he said that he never texted him and that he didn't know he'd be here until an hour ago. Something is going on and people are luring the passengers there. Ben and Mick start to realize that this club is filled with 828ers, and we pan over to those drug champagne bottles from earlier being the main attraction because free drinks will get anyone to come out. People start passing out left and right, and everybody loses their phone service. The doors get locked, and we cut to Isaiah literally setting the place on fire. Yeah, so this is not an X-Air attack. Isaiah is pulling a drink the Kool-Aid situation right now. At the same time this is happening, Saanvi passes out again from another one of her experiments to try and get rid of the callings. Yeah, tensions were high in this episode, and it was definitely one of the show's best. Some key highlights from this fire escape were Zeke straight up is immune to fire apparently, Jared shows up and helps save Mick, Zeke, and Bethany, and as TJ, Ben, and Olive try to escape, Isaiah pulls up and tries to drag Olive back. TJ knocks him down, but he won't let him go, so Ben has to leave him behind and save Olive. They can't find a way out until a beaming light shows Ben an escape. The fire was too much, and sadly TJ was stuck inside and presumed dead, and goddammit, this show never lets up, man. We cut back to Saanvi as she wakes up, and she has successfully removed the blood marker from her DNA, presumably getting rid of her callings. She's all excited to go tell Ben, but as she's leaving the hospital, that's when everyone arrives from the nightclub fire. She checks on Zeke's minimal burns, but it turns out it's actually frostbite, showing that his death date is approaching, because remember, how you died the first time is how you die on your death date, and he froze in a cave in the woods. The episode ends with Ben and Grace as they're comforting Olive about TJ. She remembers he ordered a copy of Alzurus' journal to Ben's office and he goes to read it. Ben sees a picture that eerily resembles him carrying Olive out of the nightclub when he saw the light, almost like Alzurus was looking at them from the past, but again we will discuss that in another video. But this jam-packed episode ends with the book glowing with a bright light right off the page as Ben stares at it in bewilderment. For the sake of everyone watching, I had to split this video into 2 parts so it wouldn't be 45 minutes long, but don't worry, part 2 will be dropping really soon. The first video is episode 1 through 7 of season 2, and the next one we will jump right in episode 8 and wrap up the season. Thank you to everyone who showed love on the first video, it did way better than I anticipated. To be honest, I wasn't prepared at all for everybody waiting for the video for season 2. But now since you guys like it, the videos will be coming in higher frequency, so make sure to turn on that notification button and subscribe if you want to see more Manifest content in the future. So see you guys later for part 2 of season 2 of Manifest.